You know, we live in a time when silence is louder than noise, when you can be thinking about someone so much that they almost feel like they're sitting beside you, but in reality, they haven't called, texted, or even acknowledged your existence in months, maybe years. And yet, there they are, in your mind. At the grocery store, you see something they like, and your chest aches. In the middle of the night, you replay conversations you never had. Driving to work, a song plays, and suddenly you're right back where you were with them. And it makes you wonder, why is this person still here, rent free in my head, when we haven't spoken in forever? I'm here to tell you that's not random. That's not just because. The human mind doesn't hold on for no reason. If he's always in your mind without any communication, it means something. So today, I want to walk you through 9 truths about what that really means, and I promise it's going to get real, raw, and maybe a little uncomfortable. 1, it means there's unfinished emotional business, you know. Human beings are wired for completion. Our nervous system doesn't like loose ends. We like beginnings, middles, and endings, the full arc. That's why we finish movies we don't even like. That's why we keep reading a book after the halfway mark, even if it's not that good. Our brains are obsessed with closure. So when a connection, whether it's a relationship, a friendship, or something in between, ends abruptly or without resolution, your brain treats it like an open tab in your mental browser. You can close all the other tabs, but that one keeps flashing in the background, quietly draining your emotional battery. You're living your life, working, going out with friends, moving forward, but in the background, that tab is still there, still active, still pulling focus. Why? Because there's unfinished emotional business. Sometimes that business is questions you never got to ask. Why did you leave? Did I mean anything to you? Was it real? Other times, it's words you never got to say. I'm sorry, I forgive you. You hurt me more than you'll ever understand. And here's the truth: silence doesn't end a connection. It suspends it in midair. That's why when you think about him, it feels less like remembering and more like being pulled. Your body remembers the tension, your heart remembers the story without the ending, and your mind is still trying to write the last chapter, except you can't, because he's not here to co-author it. I think of unfinished emotional business like an unpacked suitcase in the corner of a room. You can ignore it for a while. You can even cover it with a blanket so you don't have to look at it. But deep down, you know it's there. And every time your mind drifts back to him, it's like you've caught sight of that suitcase again, full of things you haven't decided what to do with yet. And let's be real, sometimes we keep people in our minds because we're hoping the business will finish itself. That one day, without warning, they'll text or call or show up. And in that moment, all the loose ends will finally tie themselves together. But here's the hard part. Waiting for someone else to give you closure is like waiting for the weather to be perfect before you leave the house. You might wait forever. The business stays unfinished not because you can't finish it, but because finishing it means facing the reality that you may never get the answers you want. And that's uncomfortable. That's vulnerable. That's why you keep him in your mind, not because you can't move on, but because you don't yet know how to close a story alone. 2, it means they represent more than themselves. Here's the thing about people who linger in our minds long after they're gone: sometimes we're not actually holding on to them. We're holding on to what they symbolize. It's not just about the man himself. It's about the season of your life he's tied to. It's about the feelings, the energy, the version of yourself you were when he was around. Maybe he walked into your life during a time when you felt fearless and alive. Maybe you were taking risks, laughing louder, staying out later, saying yes to things you wouldn't say yes to now. And every time you think of him, you're not just remembering him, you're remembering you back then. Or maybe he showed up during a chapter when you were fragile, uncertain, and searching for meaning. And even if that time was painful, there was something deeply real about it, something raw, And now he's become a marker in your memory for that entire chapter. When you think about him, it's like your mind replays a highlight reel of a whole era, not just a single relationship. This is why letting go feels so much harder than it should. You're not just saying goodbye to a person, you're saying goodbye to a feeling, to a certain identity you once carried. It's like packing up a house where every wall is painted with a memory, every corner holds a story. You're not just leaving furniture behind, you're leaving a whole life behind. I think of it like a bookmark. You might not even love the book anymore, but that bookmark sits right where you stopped reading. It holds the place of a story that mattered to you once. He's that bookmark. And sometimes you find yourself flipping back to that page, not because you want to be with him, but because you want to feel the atmosphere of that chapter, the scent, the scenery, the texture of your life back then. The danger here is that we can start idealizing the symbol more than the reality. The man in your mind becomes the keeper of all those emotions, and he gets polished in memory until he's shinier than he ever was in real life. You forget his flaws, his silence, his distance. You remember only the magic, the spark, the things that made your heart race. And here's where it gets tricky when someone represents more than themselves. Removing them from your mind feels like erasing a piece of your own history. It's not just losing a person, it's losing a part of me. That's why your thoughts keep circling back. You're not chasing him, you're chasing what he unlocked in you. 3. It means you're still carrying an emotional imprint when someone deeply impacts us, whether through love, heartbreak, betrayal, or even just a single unforgettable moment. They don't just pass through our lives like strangers on a street. They leave a mark. I call it an emotional imprint. It's not visible. It doesn't show up on X-rays or blood tests, but it's real as a scar, and just like a scar, it may fade with time, but it never completely disappears. Here's the thing about emotional imprints. They don't care about time or distance. Months can pass, years can pass. You can go through whole life changes, new job, new city, new partner, and still, something as small as the way the light hits at sunset, or the smell of coffee in the morning, can trigger that imprint and pull them right back into your mind. It's not just about remembering them, it's about reliving a feeling they awakened in you. That's what makes it so sticky. Our brains are wired to remember emotional highs and lows more vividly than neutral moments. Psychologists call it emotional salience. It's why you can't remember what you had for breakfast 2 weeks ago, but you can remember in vivid detail the exact sound of his laugh from 3 years ago. When you carry an emotional imprint, it's like carrying a song in your body. You may not hear it all the time, but the melody lives in you. And when the right chord is struck through a scent, a sound, a season, it starts playing again, whether you want it to or not. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Sometimes we mistake the imprint for the person. We think we're longing for them, but in reality, we're longing for the emotional state we experienced with them. The warmth, the passion, the adventure, the security, whatever it was. The brain ties that feeling to them, even though, in truth, they were just the trigger, not the whole source. This is why it can feel almost impossible to get them out of your mind, because you're not just letting go of a name or a face. You're trying to let go of an entire emotional landscape. And that landscape is deeply woven into your identity, your memories, your very sense of self. It's like trying to take the ocean out of a seashell. You can hold the shell in your hand and tell yourself the water's gone. But if you listen closely, you'll still hear the waves. 4. It means silence has created a vacuum. Silence is one of the most underestimated forces in human relationships. We tend to think of silence as neutral, passive, harmless. But when it comes to someone who has a place in your heart, silence isn't empty, it's loud. When there's no communication, Your mind doesn't just shut down the connection. It does the opposite. It starts working overtime to fill in the blanks. The human brain hates uncertainty. It would rather have a bad answer than no answer at all. So, in the absence of real information, your mind begins building a story, and that's where the vacuum forms. In science, a vacuum is a space with no matter in it. Nature doesn't like that. The moment you create a vacuum, something will rush in to fill it. The same thing happens in relationships. The moment there's silence, your imagination, your memories, and your hopes rush in to take up the space. So if you haven't heard from him in days, weeks, months, maybe even years, the silence becomes its own kind of presence. Every unanswered text, every absence from your social media feed, every holiday that passes without a word, it all deepens the vacuum. And in that vacuum, your mind projects. Maybe he's thinking about me too. Maybe he regrets what happened. Maybe one day he'll come back. The truth is, silence can feel more powerful than communication because communication gives you facts, while silence leaves room for fantasy. And fantasy is often more intoxicating than reality. I've seen this over and over in my research. The less access we have to someone's reality, the more we idealize them. The mind starts replaying the best moments, polishing the rough edges, conveniently forgetting the conflict. Before long, the person you're thinking about is not even the same person who exists in the real world. They've become a curated memory, airbrushed by the absence of new information. This is why breaking free from someone who's not speaking to you can be harder than leaving someone who is, because silence is seductive. It whispers possibilities into your ear. It lets you keep the door cracked open without having to face what's really on the other side. And here's the kicker: in the absence of their voice, yours gets louder, but not always in a good way. You start overanalyzing every interaction you ever had with them. You replay words, moments, glances, and assign them new meanings you're not even sure are real. You can talk yourself into hope, into heartbreak, and back into hope again, all without a single text from them. So when he's always in your mind without any communication, sometimes it's not just about who he was to you. It's about the silence he left behind and the endless, echoing vacuum you've been trying to fill ever since. 5. It means you're navigating longing. Not just missing. There's a big difference between missing someone and longing for them. Missing is about absence. It's noticing the space where they used to be. It's that quiet ache when you see their side of the bed empty, or when you go to share a funny story and realize they're not there to hear it. Missing is noticing the gap. Longing is different. Longing is about possibility. It's not just looking at the empty space, it's imagining what could be filling it. Longing isn't just about what's gone. It's about what could have been, what still might be, and what your heart wishes could happen even if your head knows better. When you're longing, you're not just remembering the past, you're holding onto an unlived future. You're replaying moments that never happened, conversations you never had, trips you never took, the life you could have built together if things had gone differently. And here's why longing is so powerful: your brain can't always distinguish between reality and vividly imagined possibility. If you visualize something strongly enough, your nervous system responds as though it's real. That's why when you're longing, your body reacts, your heart rate changes, your mood shifts. You might even feel butterflies all over something that exists only in your mind. The dangerous part is that longing can feel sweeter than reality ever was. It's polished, it's edited. There are no awkward pauses, no arguments over nothing, no disappointing moments. It's a version of the relationship that's been perfected in the workshop of your imagination. And every time you think of him, you're not just thinking about him, you're thinking about the flawless future version of him that exists only in your mind. That's why it's so hard to shake someone when you're in a state of longing. You're not fighting reality, you're fighting your own dreams, and dreams don't break up with you. They don't block you, they don't ghost you, they don't tell you they've moved on. They stay alive for as long as you feed them with your attention. I think of longing like a phantom limb. Even after something is gone, you still feel it. You still try to reach for it. Your brain still sends signals as if it's there. And no one can convince you it's not real because in your body, in your emotions, in your heart, it still is. So when he's always in your mind without any communication, sometimes it's not because you're missing the past, it's because you're still deeply connected to the possibility of a future that never happened. And that's a hard thing to let go of, because letting go of that future means admitting that some stories you wanted to live will remain unwritten. 6. It means part of you is still tethered when we talk about being tethered to someone. We're not talking about active communication or physical closeness. A tether is an invisible connection. Sometimes it's a thread. Sometimes it's a chain that still ties part of your heart, your memory, or your identity to another person. And here's the thing, you can be tethered without even realizing it. You can date other people, change cities, start over in every possible way, and still, there's this faint but undeniable pull in one direction. It's like an emotional gravity. The tricky part is that when you're tethered, you're often not tethered to who they are now. You're tethered to a version of them that lives in your memory. That version is frozen in time, untouched by mistakes they might have made since, unchallenged by new realities, preserved in the golden light of nostalgia. It's like keeping an old photograph in your wallet. The person in that picture can't change. They can't disappoint you. They can't age, evolve, or show you sides of themselves you might not like. They're perfect in the way only memories can be perfect. And so, part of you stays connected not to the human being as they exist in this moment, but to the idea of them you carry in your heart, and the mind loves ideas. Ideas can't betray you. They can't ghost you. They can't let you down. That's why it's so seductive to keep the tether intact, because reality can be messy. But the version in your head is flawless in all the ways reality never is. But here's the other side of it. Sometimes that tether is tied to unfinished self work. Maybe they were the first person who made you feel truly seen. Maybe they were the one who awakened a part of you you didn't know existed. Maybe they were the mirror that reflected back your worth, and now, without them, you're still trying to see yourself the same way. So instead of cutting the tether, you hold onto it, thinking that keeping them in your mind keeps you closer to that version of yourself, and in a way it does, but it also keeps you from walking freely into your future. The truth about tethers is that they're not always bad, they just need to be acknowledged. You can't untie something you won't admit is there. And sometimes the reason he's always in your mind is because that invisible string is still wrapped around your heart, and part of you is afraid of what will happen if you finally cut it. 7. It means you haven't fully processed the loss. Processing a loss is not the same thing as getting over it. We love to throw around that phrase, just get over it, as if grief and emotional bonds are something you can cross off your to-do list. But loss doesn't work like that. It's not a straight line, and it's not a timed race. When someone is still living in your mind long after communication has stopped, it's often a sign that you've skipped steps in your emotional processing. Maybe you've tried to outrun the pain by staying busy. Maybe you've distracted yourself with new people, new projects, new goals. Maybe you've told yourself you're fine so many times that you've started to believe it until a quiet night, a random song, or an unexpected memory pulls you right back into the ache. Here's what I've learned in my research and my own life. Unprocessed grief doesn't disappear. It waits. It hides in the corners of your mind, in the folds of your heart, until something or someone wakes it up again. And when it wakes up, it feels as fresh as the day you first felt it. Sometimes the reason we don't fully process a loss is because we're afraid of what we'll find on the other side. We think, if I let myself feel all of this, it'll swallow me whole. So we keep the lid half closed. We let ourselves cry a little, talk about it a little, think about it a little, but never so much that it cracks us open completely. But the problem with half processing is that it leaves half the weight still on your chest. And that weight shows up as constant mental reminders of them. It's why you catch yourself imagining conversations, replaying moments, or wondering what they're doing right now. Your mind is circling the drain of something it never finished cleaning out. I think of unprocessed loss like an unpacked moving box in your new home. At first, you tell yourself, I'll get to it later. You even stack other things on top of it so you don't have to look inside. But deep down, you know what's in there, and every time you walk past it, you feel a subtle, nagging pull, a reminder that something is still unresolved. And here's the really vulnerable part. Sometimes we don't process a loss because we're scared that if we truly let go, we'll lose the last connection we have to that person. We hold on to the pain because it feels like the last thread tying us to them. Processing feels like erasing, and erasing feels like betrayal. So instead, we keep them in our mind, not because we want to be stuck, but because our grief is unfinished. And until it's finished, until we allow ourselves to truly sit in it, feel it, and honor it, their presence in our thoughts will keep circling back like a tide we can't turn. 8. It means they've become a mental habit. Not every thought about someone is rooted in deep emotion. Sometimes it's just habit. Thinking about a person can become as automatic as checking your phone when you wake up, biting your nails when you're nervous, or reaching for the light switch in a room you've walked through 100 times. It's not always conscious, it's wired into your mental routine. When you've spent a significant amount of time emotionally invested in someone, talking to them every day, sharing details of your life, daydreaming about them, your brain builds a neurological pathway. Every time you think of them, the pathway gets stronger. Over time, it becomes less about choosing to think of them and more about your brain defaulting to them. Here's the wild thing: the brain doesn't really care if a habit is good for you or not. It only cares that it's familiar, and familiarity feels safe even when it's painful. That's why you can find yourself thinking about him on autopilot while you're brushing your teeth, waiting in line, cooking dinner. It's not necessarily a deep emotional pull in that moment. It's a mental reflex you've rehearsed for so long, it feels like second nature. The problem is, habits feed themselves. The more you let your mind wander to him, the more it wants to wander there again. It's like a well-worn trail in the woods. Your thoughts keep taking the same path because it's easy, even if it doesn't lead anywhere good. And here's the vulnerable part: sometimes we want the habit to stay, not because we enjoy the ache, but because it gives us a sense of connection, even in the absence of real communication. It's a way of keeping the story alive, keeping them relevant, keeping the tether from snapping. But habits, no matter how deeply ingrained, can be rewired. The first step is realizing that some of your thoughts aren't messages from your heart. They're just patterns your brain has memorized. And until you interrupt the pattern, it will keep looping over and over, no matter how much time passes. So when he's always in your mind, it might not always mean you're still in love, or still broken-hearted, or still waiting for him. Sometimes it just means you've trained your brain to go there, and like any habit, it will keep going there until you choose to take a different road. 9. It means there's still a part of the story you need to own. Sometimes the reason someone stays in your mind for so long isn't because of who they are, what they did, or even what they meant to you. It's because your story with them is still unfinished from your side. We wait for closure like it's a package someone else has to deliver. We think when they explain themselves, when they apologize, when they admit what really happened, then I can move on. But here's the truth. Sometimes the person who hurt you, left you, or simply disappeared will never give you the ending you're waiting for. And if you tie your peace to their participation, you will wait forever. Owning your story means deciding to finish it yourself. It means being willing to say, this is what happened. This is what it meant. This is what I learned. And this is who I am now because of it. It's vulnerable work because it forces you to admit the ways you showed up, the ways you stayed too long, the ways you ignored red flags, or maybe even the ways you hurt them too. It's so much easier to stay in the role of the one who was left, the one who was wronged, than to step into the discomfort of seeing the full picture. But here's why owning your part matters. When you don't, the story doesn't belong to you, it belongs to them. They get to hold the pen, and you stay stuck in the same chapter, rereading the same paragraphs in your mind, wondering how it all could have gone differently. Owning your story doesn't mean justifying their actions or pretending the hurt didn't matter. It means reclaiming the narrative so you're no longer defined by what happened to you, but by what you chose to do with it. Think of it like a house you used to live in. For years you've been walking past it, staring at the front porch, wondering who's living there now, what changes they've made, and whether they ever think about you. Owning your story is like finally turning away from that house and saying, that chapter of my life is complete. I built it, I lived in it, and now I'm building something new. When he's always in your mind without any communication, it can mean you've been standing outside that old house for too long waiting for the previous tenant to come out and hand you the keys. But the truth is, you already have the power to walk away. The story is yours. It always has been. The question is whether you're ready to write the rest without him. So if he's still in your mind without a single word being exchanged, it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. It means you cared, you invested, you felt deeply, and the echoes of that don't just disappear on command. But here's the thing. Someone can live in your thoughts without deserving to live in your future. At some point, you have to decide if you're going to keep letting his shadow walk beside you, or if you're ready to step into the sunlight alone. Because the goal isn't to erase him from your mind, the goal is to reclaim the space he's been taking up, and fill it with your own life, your own dreams, your own voice. You don't have to hate him. You don't have to forget him, but you do have to choose yourself, and maybe one day, without even realizing it, you'll wake up and realize he's not the first thought that crosses your mind anymore. You'll notice that your heart feels lighter, your mornings feel freer, and your story feels like yours again. That's not forgetting. That's not losing. That's you finally moving forward with both hands on the pen, writing the next chapter on your own terms.